Hello everyone, it's Seth, probably better known as Saffron Olive, and we're back here today with another edition of Against the Odds. So last week on the Against the Odds poll, Stuffy Doll in Modern came out the easy winner, far ahead of the other options. And by far ahead, I mean like 2% ahead. But still, this week we are playing a Stuffy Doll deck in Modern, and I think it turned out pretty sweet. So, Stuffy Doll is basically the magic card incarnation of a voodoo doll. It's 5 mana, it's a 0/1, it's indestructible, which I guess is somewhat nice, although not that great in Modern, since we have Dismembers and Paths to Exile. Dark Blast even, for 1 mana, kills a Stuffy Doll. So, but it's indestructible, 5 mana, 0/1. When it enters the battlefield, you choose a player, and whenever Stuffy Doll is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to the chosen player. Then you can tap it to deal 1 damage to itself. So basically, it can ping itself, which pings the opponent. So the idea of Stuffy Doll is we have this voodoo doll, and we need to stick some needles or pins or nails, or I don't know. I am not well versed in how to use a voodoo doll, but inflict pain on our Stuffy Doll, and then that inflicts pain on our opponent. Because our deck is built around inflicting pain on our own creatures, we have some substitute Stuffy Dolls as well. 4 wasn't quite enough, so we have 4 copies of Boros Reckoner. So 3 hybrid red or white mana, you get a 3/3. Whenever it is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to target creature or player, and then you can pay a red or a white to give Boros Reckoner first strike until end of turn. So this is very similar to Stuffy Doll. There's a few slight differences. One thing I learned about Stuffy Doll during the course of the videos is it actually doesn't target, so it gets around Leyline of Sanctity, which actually means it's like this sick sideboard tech. If you're a burn deck playing against Leyline of Sanctity, you can play a Stuffy Doll and then throw your lightning bolts and such at your own Stuffy Doll, and it will redirect it to the opponent even through a Leyline of Sanctity. That doesn't work with Boros Reckoner because that actually targets. The upside is it can also hit a creature, so you can use it to kill creatures as well as damage players. And Spite Mare is basically a worse and more expensive and older version of Boros Reckoner. 4 mana, 2 of it red or white, the hybrid mana up there. Whenever it is dealt damage, it deals that much damage to a creature or player, and it is a 3/3. So very similar to Boros Reckoner. We only have one of those because it's the worst of the bunch. So basically, we have 9 creatures that we want to try to deal damage to, and then we can pass that damage along to our opponent. So what are we using to inflict damage on our dolls? We have a few sweet ones. First off, most importantly, we have 4 copies of Volcano Helion. This card is really crazy because it is worded in such a weird way. So it is a 4 mana 6/5. Volcano Helion has Echo X, where X is your life total. So on our next upkeep after we play Volcano Helion, we have to pay that X or we sacrifice it. And when it comes into play, it deals an amount of damage of your choice to you and to target creature, and that damage can't be prevented. So Volcano Helion, when it enters the battlefield, we can deal any amount of damage. The problem is that damage is also inflicted upon us. So we could deal 1,000,000 damage to a creature, theoretically, but we would also take 1,000,000 damage, and that would kill us, so that doesn't really work usually. But we have a couple ways to break this symmetry. So that's one of the ways that we inflict pain on our dolls. We also have, and then thereby also to our opponent, because it gets passed along to our opponent, we have 2 Blasphemous Acts, 8 colorless and 1 red for a sorcery. It costs 1 less to cast for each creature on the battlefield, and Blasphemous Act deals 13 damage to each creature. So, if we have a Stuffy Doll on the battlefield, and we cast a Blasphemous Act, it'll wipe the board, and it will also deal 13 damage to our Stuffy Doll, and that 13 damage will get redirected to our opponent. If we have 2 dolls, any of them, Boros Reckoner, Spite Mare, Stuffy Doll, we will do 26 damage to our opponent by resolving a Blasphemous Act, so that, in theory, just wins us the game on the spot. Then, maybe the sweetest one, we have 3 copies of Pariah. So Pariah is a white enchantment, 2 and a white, and it says redirect to enchanted creature all damage dealt to you. That's kind of archaic wording. I think the wording now says all damage dealt to you is dealt to target creature or enchanted creature instead. So basically, if we can get a Pariah on a Stuffy Doll, or a Boros Reckoner, or a Spite Mare, we can use our Volcano Helion to deal 10,000 damage to our Stuffy Doll, wearing the Pariah. It also deals 10,000 damage to us, but that doesn't really matter because the damage that's dealt to us also goes to the Stuffy Doll. So if we deal 10,000 damage with Volcano Helion, we actually end up doing 20,000 damage to our opponent. So it's a 3-card combo. It's a little janky, but that's one of the ultimate goals, is to see if we can deal 20,000 damage to our opponent by using one of our dolls, the Volcano Helion and the Pariah. Then, I had to mention this on its own side. Basically, we have the new version of the Splinter Twin combo. So Splinter Twin, as you know, banned in Modern, not around anymore. But what that deck did was play a 3-drop into a 4-drop and then win the game. The way they did it was by tapping and untapping, making a million tokens with Splinter Twin on a Deceiver, Exarch, or Pestermite, attacking with all of them. Well, we can kind of do the same thing with a Boros Reckoner, which is a 3-drop. So this is the Deceiver, Exarch, or Pestermite of the combo. On the battlefield, assuming our opponent has 1 less life even than us, they crack a fetch land, or we hit them with a lightning bolt, we can play a Boros Reckoner on turn 3, play Volcano Helion on turn 4, and deal an amount of damage equal to our opponent's life total to Boros Reckoner and to ourselves. And remember, we have theoretically 1 more life than our opponent because they cracked a fetch or something, and we win the game on the spot on turn 4. Turn 3 Boros Reckoner, turn 4 Volcano Helion. Good game, well played. Let's go to game 2. So it's basically Splinter Twin, janky Splinter Twin, but it is similar to Splinter Twin. Anyhow, other creatures, we have 3-core Firewalkers. This one was a neat one. I was just talking about the Splinter Twin combo. Well, the main idea of that combo, for us to have the turn 4 kill with Boros Reckoner and Volcano Helion, is we need to be a life ahead of our opponent. Well, Core Firewalker kind of makes sure that happens. If we can play that on turn 2, when we play the Boros Reckoner on turn 3, we'll gain a life, because whenever we cast a red spell, or any player casts a red spell, Core Firewalker allows us to gain a life. And then when we cast the Volcano Helion on turn 4, we also gain a life. So it's a way to help make sure that we're ahead on life if we try to pull off that combo. Also, it survives Blasphemous Act, so it's a pretty sweet creature in the deck, and it also just allows us to randomly hose mono red decks or something, main deck. And then 3 Fulminator Mage. This one is purely, I was worried about our deck ever beating Tron or Eldrazi, and I thought that maybe Fulminator Mage would help buy us enough time to pull off our combos before we die to a Karn Liberated or an Ugin or Ulamog or whatever those big mana decks are doing. Then we have a bit of removal, 4 bolts, 4 lightning helixes. I mentioned these earlier. Against Leyline of Sanctity, we can throw these at our Stuffy Doll and still damage our opponent, but the main reason they're in the deck is to kill our opponent's creatures, and then 4 Path to Exile, also to kill creatures of our opponents. Then, land-wise, you'll notice no fetch lands in this one, and the reason for no fetch lands is we want to be 1 ahead on life for the Volcano Helion combo, so we're hoping that our opponent cracks a fetch, or plays a shock untapped, to be slightly lower on life than us, and if we're also fetching and shocking ourselves, then that's not going to work. So that's the reason there's no fetches, but for Temple of Triumph, the red-white Scryland, for Sacred Foundry, the red-white Shockland, for Clifftop Retreat, the red-white Buddy Land, or whatever you want to call those, enters the battlefield tapped unless we control a mountain or plains. For Ghost Quarters, this one's a little weird. It feels odd to be playing 4 Ghost Quarters in a Boros Reckoner deck because Boros Reckoner has such a restrictive mana cost. But again, I'm just really worried about getting blown out by Tron and Eldrazi, so I think that it's worth the cost. Even if we sometimes have to play our Boros Reckoner on turn 4, I think that we will win more games by having Ghost Quarters than by consistently playing Boros Reckoner on turn 3. And that doesn't come up that often because all the rest of our sources help us cast a Boros Reckoner on time. 5 mountains, 3 plains, so that's the main deck. Sideboard-wise, 2 Pithing Needles, so way to deal with planeswalkers primarily. 3 Stony Silence, really good against Affinity. A Rule of Law, good against combo decks, Ad Nauseam, Storm, by only allowing players to play 1 spell each turn. And we're typically only playing 1 spell anyway, so it's not too big of a drawback. 2 Blood Moons, some more land hate for Eldrazi and Tron, those type of decks. 3 Timely Reinforcements, good against Burn, aggro decks, another way to gain some life and make sure we're ahead on life when we cast our Volcano Helion. 2 Crumble to Dust, more land hate, Eldrazi, Tron, so forth. A Wear Tear, deals with an artifact or an enchantment, or both in our deck. And a Shatterstorm, another way to deal with artifacts, kills all artifacts when we cast it. So that's the deck. We are looking to play our dolls, our Boros Reckoner, Spike Mirror, our Stuffy Doll, then deal damage to our dolls with Volcano Helion or Blasphemous Act, and our magical Christmas land is that we will get a Pariah on a Stuffy Doll or a Boros Reckoner, and then use Volcano Helion to deal an insanely large amount of damage, because we can actually, I don't know if it'll work on Magic Online, but in theory we can deal any amount of damage we choose, an infinite amount of damage, although we actually have to choose a number, so it's not truly infinite. But that's the idea of the deck. Whether or not it'll be successful, I'm not sure. We don't really have good interaction against counterspell decks. We do have some answers to the big mana decks, so I think it's going to depend on what we run into. There's also a chance that we can just win games by getting in some attacks with Core Firewalker and Boros Reckoner, and backing that up with Lightning Bolts and Lightning Helixes. So I think we'll win some games. Getting the entire combo of Pariah plus a Doll plus Volcano Helion, that's probably going to be a little tricky, mostly because all those creatures die relatively easily. Even Stuffy Doll, like I said earlier, even though it's indestructible, there's a lot of things in Modern that kill it, so being indestructible as a 0/1 really isn't that impressive. So we'll see. I think that we'll pull it off sooner or later, but it might be challenging to do something crazy with the Stuffy Doll Volcano Helion combo. On the other hand, if we're playing a deck that doesn't have much interaction, we can randomly go turn 3 Boros Reckoner, turn 4 Volcano Helion, win the game on the spot just like Splinter Twin. So we'll see how it goes. I'm guessing maybe like 30% of the time, 1 out of 3 games we can win. Whether or not we can win a match will mostly depend on the matchups. But I think we can win a few games, and hopefully we'll have fun doing it. Like, the idea of it's pretty fun, and I like the idea of it, so we'll see. Anyway, next week, no voting, no against the odds poll. We are doing a very special edition that everyone's been waiting for, because Oath of the Gatewatch is finally releasing on Magic Online. So, be able to do something cool. I'm not going to say what it is, but if you've been paying attention to Oath spoilers in the series and me on Twitter, you can probably get a pretty good guess what card we're going to be building around next week. So I'm excited about that. But check out the website, mtggoldfish.com. That's where you'll find the article for This Against Odds, tons of other awesome content, decks prices, metagame strategy, pretty much everything and anything you could want related to Magic the Gathering. And if you enjoyed the video, make sure to click the subscribe button that's about to pop up on the bottom of your screen to keep up to date on all the latest and greatest in video content from mtggoldfish.com. Anyway, thank you all for watching. Enjoy the Stuffy Doll videos in Modern, and I will talk to you soon.